Godot Icon Jam. This jam consisted of just 5 people, and our challenge was to use this pack of icons for all of our assets. Since we only had 15 hours of development time, I could already tell this was going to be hard to pull off. First, we need a concept, and I struggled a ton coming up with anything interesting that would work with these. And I finally had the idea, what if you had a platformer, but you could only move to the right? You see, just about every platformer gives you the basic controls left, right, and jump. So what if I took one of these away? A game with no jumping seems a little boring. But what about a game with no left button? You could only move right. I can already think of a few mechanics that will make it possible. I took inspiration from good old Super Mario Bros. In Mario, boos try to attack you when you're not facing their direction. I wanted something like that, but put to the extreme. To make the character, I took multiple of these sprites together to make a box, and then I put an arrow on it. And this arrow was to show that you could only move to the right. My first idea was to just kill the player if they turned around. It would be funny, but I only have 15 hours for this game. So I decided to keep it simple and you can only travel in the direction of the arrow. And right now you're probably thinking, how the frick are you gonna make more than 2 levels if all you can do is jump and move forward? Well, let me introduce you to this amazing mechanic. Okay, it's not that amazing, but it's a pretty big deal, because this is going to be the player's first official way of moving backwards. Wall jumping sends the player backwards and up, and using this correctly can allow the player to reach some new places. But as you can see, the ground has friction, and when you're on the ground, you keep slowing down until you're stopped. So how could we not stop? Jumping instantly will retain almost all of the player's speed, so we can keep this momentum for a very long time. Just watch. As you can see, the player can now travel a considerable distance backwards with just a simple wall jump. I also made the player jump like Mario. Your jump gets higher the longer you hold the jump button, and it shortens the less you hold it. So having this variance in jump height is just one more mechanic I can work with. The next thing I added was a rotator. This gave the player a way of changing the direction that they're facing. All you need to do is wall jump on it and it will flip you around to the other direction. This single block alone opens so many more possibilities. Now, levels can have even more of a puzzle solving aspect. The next object I added was a spike, because every platformer needs a spike. And with the spikes, I need a death animation. So I made the player burst into black and white pixels whenever they die. Similar to my previous platformer, the spike would just spawn you back at the beginning of the level. Not because I'm lazy, but because I'm efficient. My goal was to make the game more fun instead of difficult. So there's not going to be a ton of spikes until you get to the last 2 levels. To keep the game from being too easy for real gamers, I added a big coin that you can go for just for fun. It doesn't really do anything special, but it acts as a challenge if players want to take the risk to grab it. There's one in every level, and generally it's a bit tricky to collect. My next items to add were springs. Godot loves to be user-friendly, and so I had to remake the spring for every direction that I was going to use it in the tile map. So because I wanted springs aimed left, right, and up, I had to make 3 different springs. And then I had to import them each separately into the tile map, even though they were all basically identical. The springs will also allow for a higher jump or unique horizontal movement. To spice things up, I made a special tile that's enabled or disabled based on the direction that you're pointing in. So if you're facing to the right, these ones are going to be enabled and these ones will be disabled. And the opposite happens whenever you flip to the left. These can be great to act as one-way doors, temporary wall jumps, or just another way to make puzzles. It may seem like a small addition, but they add so much depth to the game. One last obstacle I wanted to add were these deadly walls. These walls would turn from white to red. When they're white, they act like a normal solid wall. You can step on them, jump on them, and even wall jump on them. But once they turn red, they act like a big spike. Instead of becoming a wall, they become a big hitbox. And touching that hitbox will make the player explode to the beginning. To make it a little bit more fair, I made the hitbox of it a little bit smaller than the collision. So if it's white and you're right next to it and then it turns red, you'll be fine. You'll only die if you run into it when it's red. And finally, I need to be able to finish a level. So I chose the icon that looked most like a door, and I made it a door. Now after making all of those special blocks, hazards, and mechanics, I need to start designing levels. But level design is hard, and game dev in general is pretty difficult. So here's why you should check out the sponsor of today's video, Skillshare. I've been wanting to learn Unreal Engine for quite some time, and Skillshare's dedicated classes for beginners is a great starting point for exactly that. And if you want to learn a different game engine like Unity or Godot, Skillshare still has you covered. Skillshare offers thousands of classes led by experts in film, illustration, design, freelance, productivity, and yes, game development. There is a massive variety of different topics to learn. From cooking to video editing, Skillshare can take your skills, hobbies, passions, or even careers to the next level. I absolutely love to learn new skills, and Skillshare is a great community for that very thing. Instead of wasting your time rummaging through low-quality videos on other platforms, you can be sure Skillshare has excellent videos no matter the topic. And on top of that, Skillshare will show you exactly what level each class is for, so you can efficiently find the class that's best suited for you. The first 500 people to use my link in the description will receive a 1-month free trial of Skillshare, so get started today. Like I mentioned before, I didn't want the game to be extremely hard, so I made most of the levels pretty easy. Especially when introducing a mechanic, you have to be very intentional with level design. Figuring out mechanics on your own can feel so much more rewarding than just being told how it works. For example, I made this level 1 at first, but then I changed it to this. But why? Well, it's pretty easy to make a 2-block jump with a short press of the jump button. But for a jump that's 3 blocks high, you have to hold down the jump button. Most people might tap the button at first, and then they'll hold it down to realize they can't make it with a simple tap, so they'll eventually learn how the jump works on their own. I put a similar concept for level 2. The goal is clearly behind you and it seems impossible, so if you can only move forward and jump, eventually you'll end up against this wall. And if you jump again while you're in the air, the player will figure out how to wall jump on their own. Then I needed to add sound effects. To save time, I used old sounds that I previously made, and it was just for jumps, wall jumps, collecting coins, and dying. Everything up to this point was done in the 15 hours of development time, but there were a few things I wish I could have added. I had a level select menu, but the issue was you couldn't tell what level you were on when you were actually playing. This bothered me so much, and I wish I could have added it in the 15 hours, but I just ran out of time. And remember this basic mechanic where jumping will keep your momentum? Well, I decided to make it into a mini game. Your goal is to wall jump and cover the longest distance possible without stopping. Usually there's a 5-frame jump buffer, but I decided to take it away for this challenge. And remember, spamming jump is not the optimal way, because holding down your jump button gives you the most height. Next, I had to fix a bug with the coins. It would play this sound effect when you collect it, but the issue was it would still play the sound effect after it was collected. So that took no time at all. Then, you know I had to add the classic CRT filter. It just makes everything look better. And that is the finished game. I'm so happy I got the concept to work and that I could actually make it into a finished game. If you want to play it right now, there will be a link in the description. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.